February 8th, 2018, meeting of the Regional Planning Governing Board to order, please. Can we start off with a roll call?
Jenny Breckus, absent. Naomi Dewar.
Here.
Paul McKenzie. Here. Marsha Burke-Bigler.
Here.
Charlene Bybee.
Here.
David Bobzien.
Here.
Donald Abbott.
Here.
Ed Lawson. Here. Vaughn Hartung.
Present.
Jean Herman.
Here.
And non-voting member Veronica Frankel.
Here.
Okay, thank you. I would like to invite our guests that are here from a place that is actually having a winter this year, from Enterprise Community Partners, to lead us in the pledge this afternoon.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chair, a question. Was Ms. Breckus calling in?
Staff, do we have a call in from Commissioner Breckus?
I don't believe so, no.
No, okay.
Okay.
Okay, if that changes, you'll advise us. Okay, thank you. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Approval of the meeting, of the minutes, and this is great. We're going all the way back to March 30th, 2017. It was, seemed like old times.
Yes.
Would you say? Take a motion on the minutes, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving now to item 5, public comment, and we have, okay, was it okay to do a motion with the 2, or would you prefer separate motions for each one? Yeah, the motion, as I understood it, was for March 30th and December 14th. Absolutely. So item 5, public comment. Ms. Robinson, do you want to lead off the public comment? I know that we've received a lot of input for today's meeting.
Mr. Chair, we have public comment. We have item, or specifically around a specific item, which is the second one on your agenda. We can certainly read those in at that point in time if that's your preference.
Yes, let's do that. And just for members of the audience, we have the general public comment period that is here at the beginning of our meeting. And then as I see and I look through the comment cards that I have before me, specific agenda items later in the agenda, and of course there will be public comment opportunities for those. So feel free to just hold off, and if you want to speak to that agenda item in particular, you can choose to hold off. But if you have general public comment, that's what we would invite up to the podium now. I don't believe we have any general. Looking through the cards real quick, just checking with staff. I'm sorry, we do have 2. Okay, we'll call it first Kathy Brandhorst. And just a note that public comment is limited to 3 minutes.
My name is Kathy Brandhorst, and I am the United States President. I'm still living on C Street, and it's located in Sparks, and it's still Nevada. And I just wanted to let you know the poles and wires are getting thicker in that area where I live. And more wires are connected to my rooftop and also connected to my heat. This morning I did not have heat at all because my neighbors had to steal my heater from my pipes and take it back to their place. But I just wanted to let you know they don't live there. That's why they don't have heat at all to warm up their home. If they don't live there, they don't get gas and electric, so the wires are still there. And of course, I have a gas stove, so they're taking the gas from my stove and in order for them to cook. And also, I just wanted to let you know that the electric, I have electric, so my lights go on and off. And they don't have electric. I've seen a lot of people going through the dollar stores buying candles so that they can use the candles to light up in their home because they cannot afford to pay electric. Also, I just wanted to let you know the problem was that the maintenance man came in and said, Kathy, we found body parts in your sewer line, which is my toilet line, and it was backing up. And these are coming from my neighbors. And again, my neighbors are not humans, so they do need body parts. Also, they found, again, lethal injections dripping from my sinks and my toilets and my bathtub. And the lethal injections are also dropping on my rug, so it's changing the color in my rug. Ugh. So the more that they have to change their bodies, you know, in order to get rid of the lethal injections, their bones are also deteriorating, so they're starting to steal a lot more skeleton bones and skulls, which are being chopping heads next door to me, and they were told to stay off the property because they were evicted. They have no way to stay on the property anymore. They were locked out.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Ms. Tammy Holstill.
Good afternoon, Board. Tammy Holt-Still, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee. The water's still there. I'm still here, for the record. I'd like to start off with the Nevada State Legislature gave Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency executive powers and authority on development within Washoe County. Residents feel it's time that all of Washoe County developments be reviewed by this body, no matter the size or scope of the project. There's several reasons why we feel this way. Infrastructure, police, fire, stormwater runoff, water reclamation, and fresh water. Crime. Look at the last 2 weeks. It seems like there's been a shooting almost every day. Continuity between county and city infrastructure so flooding like Lemon Valley does not happen again. Protecting open spaces and natural resources from overdevelopment. Oversight for rogue county commissioners with land deals on our public land and open spaces. These are just a few reasons this board and the agency needs to be more aggressive in protecting Washoe County land and residents from the few greedy, non-responsive authorities within county and city governments in Washoe County and the state of Nevada. I would like to thank those within TMRPA that fought to keep our representation on this board from those in question. Lemon Valley and North Valleys are still underwater, and there are many reasons for this. Here's just a couple. Lack of urgency to resolve the issue. Lack of funds or an interest to retain funds to resolve the issues. Finger pointing and no interagency or governmental cooperation, and a lot of excuses. Being as one, I would call you as the mothership, maybe it's time for TMRPA to rein in those bad children and to work to make a better life for everyone, not just the ones in power. Maybe it's time to do a rent control instead of more building. Revitalize and repurpose existing properties instead of just building new or going outside your actual sphere of influence. I and we are asking that you please feel our urgency. Please see the stress that we are going through and help us to correct the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more general public comment this afternoon?
I have none at this time.
Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Any discussion on the consent agenda, or if not, I will entertain a motion. So moved. Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Business of the day, item 7A. We're going to welcome our guests from Enterprise Community Partners. I'm assuming that you're leading this off, right? This is your presentation. This is the presentation, update, and possible direction regarding the Truckee Meadows Regional Affordable Housing Strategy efforts from Enterprise Community Partners. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Chris Kizzy, Enterprise Community Partners. One, thank you for having us here. I think we're excited about kicking off the Affordable Housing Regional Plan for Truckee Meadows. Be great to give you guys an update on where we're at, where we're going, and lay out some of the challenges that are ahead of us as well.
We may need you to move your mic just a little bit closer. I think it's on, but there we go. That should be good.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
That's good. Good stuff.
Great. Let's see, let's get this working here. All right, so just to provide you an overview of our presentation, we want to kind of provide you an overview of our approach, where we are today, how we got here, provide a quick snapshot of the regional housing trends, and the planning structure that's really going to drive and guide the development of the Affordable Housing Regional Plan for Truckee Meadows. So some of our key objectives is, one, we want to make sure there's an understanding of the importance of the regional housing plan. We do this work throughout the country, and we've seen many efforts underway to develop regional housing plans and the benefits that it can bring. So we want to kind of share that with you today. We want to provide an overview of the core issues facing the region. I think we've looked at the region as a whole, as well as the various jurisdictions within the region, and want to kind of point out some of the challenges that we see and the needs that we see related to affordable housing. And then also kind of bring you up to speed on where we are with the executive leadership team and the working groups that really kicked off this week during our visit, and we're happy to kind of share that update with you. In terms of project overview and approach, we're going to develop the 10-year regional housing plan in 3 phases. The first phase, which we're in now, consists of developing a conditions analysis that's really going to look at what are the existing conditions today of the needs in the region, as well as developing a planning structure that's really going to guide that process. Phase 2 is about codifying those needs and future trends into a housing strategy roadmap that's really going to lay out the connection between the strategies, the policies, the funding mechanisms that are really going to support this effort long-term for the region. And phase 3 is putting all that together into a 10-year regional housing plan that's really going to set up the policy, strategy, and funding framework. So in terms of timeline, phase 1 started in earnest in November 2017 and will carry through to about May 2018. And as I said, phase 1 is really about developing a regional profile of the Truckee Meadows region, as well as some of the local community profiles, so we have a good understanding of the challenges and needs across the jurisdictions and across the region, and defining what those challenges are. Phase 2, we really want to, again, deliver our strategy roadmap that's really going to lay out what the strategies are to address those challenges that we've identified during phase 1. And this is going to take about a 4-month process, beginning roughly in May 2018 and carrying forward to August 2018. And then phase 3, we're looking to develop the full plan, deliver that to TMRPA and the board roughly about November 2018. So it'll be about a year-long process, and that's pretty standard and typical for these efforts. We know there's going to be a lot of discussion and conversation, and I think giving this a credit of a year-long process, I think will be a benefit to the region. Just to kind of put this in perspective, why a regional housing plan? Why are we developing a regional housing plan for the Truckee Meadows region? One, I think it's important to note how a regional housing plan can benefit the residents of Truckee Meadows. So we know through this process that developing a regional housing plan can maximize the impact from the policy decisions, the funding decisions, and the housing investment decisions. And so that can lead to increased access to jobs, access to services, access to quality education, access to transit, better health outcomes, and housing security for residents in the region. And so attacking this on a regional level, addressing these challenges on a regional level, and building consistent collaboration and coordination throughout the region to address these challenges is going to maximize the benefit for the region, the residents in the region. From a regional perspective, affordable housing can bring more economic mobility, better quality of life, improved regional coordination, as I said, leverage policy and financial tools, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. It can lead to more diverse housing options for the residents and overall include more inclusive communities that provide access to opportunity. Just to ground everyone in kind of defining affordable housing, there's a lot of conversation on around who does affordable housing benefit. And that can range from, or the conversation usually centers around affordable housing, public housing, and workforce housing. And really, when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about all three of these things. And I think to bring that home, usually how we define it at Enterprise is really we're focused on the continuum of housing. Okay, so that housing that serves the entire continuum from those at the lower end of the income spectrum to those at the higher end of the income spectrum. And we typically range that around 0 to 120% of area median income. And just to kind of give you some perspective on the occupations that would be, that could benefit from affordable housing opportunities and investments, you'll see those on the screen here. Just to kind of put that in more perspective in terms of what is affordable currently in Washoe County relative to the area median income percentages that we just outlined. You'll see here some of the rents that a person at 30% AMI earning about $14,000 can afford in terms of $358. That's about 30% of their income. And so just to kind of give you some perspective of the rents that would be affordable to that household at that AMI. One of the things that we're extremely proud of at Enterprise Community Partners is we've developed something called the Opportunity 360 platform, which brings a more holistic approach and lens to housing investments and housing strategy decisions that doesn't look at just market factors of supply and demand. It looks broader than that, and it looks at the connections and data indicators around education, health and well-being, economic security, mobility and transportation, and housing stability. So you're making housing decisions without the benefit of, in some cases, a more cross-sector approach and a cross-sector understanding of the data. And so we're going to bring that to the Truckee Meadows region and development of this housing plan so that it's better connected to the other initiatives that are going on throughout the region. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ann Jordan, that's going to walk us through a snapshot of the regional housing trends.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time. So as Chris said, we're going to jump in with some of the trends that we've been seeing, starting with, as some of you may remember, the first time that Chris and myself were out here in January of 2017 for an affordable housing forum. And ahead of that, we conducted interviews with several stakeholders in the community, and some key trends emerged. I think as we'll go through them, you'll see that a lot still resonate today, from seeing the economic growth in the region and the increase in population starting to tighten the housing market, really contributing to that overall shortage of affordable housing. And then we also heard a bit about the lack of clarity around what affordable housing is and who it serves. We heard also about the existence of silos and how the issues are being addressed today, as well as an overall lack of funding and resources to support affordable housing development. And so these have all been things that we've been keeping in our minds as we've helped think of the structure for this effort, starting to engage additional stakeholders, and can really come up with the scope for this project. You'll see here, this is also a visual on some of the opportunities that were identified, not just the challenges, but thinking about we have ready political leadership that is ready to be engaged in this effort, opportunities around incentives and streamlined processes, the idea that everyone was really ready to move from the I to the we approach and thinking about collaboration through this effort, as well as engaging private sector and really making this a public-private strategic partnership. And then thinking about, again, as Chris mentioned, how the housing investments are aligned with transit, with community assets, with other services that residents need. And so then when we came back, we did an update and looked at some 2016 data on what the trends were in the region. And we saw a picture starting to form. So we see that incomes have not kept pace with housing price changes. We know, again, that shortage still exists and is becoming particularly intense for households at 50% of area median income and below. And then we know that looking at some of the projections and some of the work that TMRPA has done around the housing study, that the region is projected to grow, but with constraints on development through infrastructure, zoning, and expiring affordability restrictions, we're likely to see that shortage increase. We also know that this gap impacts the entire community, but the burden is being borne by some specific segments of the population, and we'll dig into that a little bit further. So this visual is to help put some numbers behind what that shortage really looks at. So when you're looking not only at what units are currently priced for different income levels, but also if they're actually available to those income levels, so they're not occupied by higher income households. You'll see the green bars on the right side are showing what's currently affordable and available at 80%, 50%, and 30% of AMI and below, relative to the blue bars on the side, which are the actual households at that income level. And when you look that and roll that all up, you see it's about a 25,000 unit gap just from in 2016 throughout Washoe County, and that includes Reno and Sparks as well as the unincorporated areas. And then to give a sense of how this is varying throughout the jurisdictions involved, we took a look at the number of affordable and available units per every 100 households at those income levels. You'll see the Sparks is in green, Reno is in red, and Washoe County is in blue there. And when you control for that size, you see, well, across the board, no one is at 100 for 100 households. There is a shortage across all income levels in all jurisdictions. But actually, it looks like Sparks has the fewest available and affordable units at each income level relative to current demand, followed by Washoe County. But even so, none of the jurisdictions are wildly far apart from one another. These trends are deeply affecting all three jurisdictions, which is why we really commend all of them coming together for this regional approach to addressing the affordable housing shortage. So then we turn to who is this impacting today? And so up front, we know this is impacting the entire community. We know that when there is a lack of affordable housing, that decreases purchasing power of residents, which has an impact on tax revenues. We know that more affordable housing can really serve to strengthen long-term investment in neighborhoods. It can create new job opportunities through construction as well as locations close to job centers. And we know that stable housing improves educational and health outcomes, not only for the children and residents of that house that's available now to them at a more affordable price, but also to everyone in their community, their fellow classmates. But then looking at who's bearing the particular burden of the affordable housing shortage right now, we see that there are about 35% of Washoe County residents who are currently paying too much of their income on housing, which we're using the HUD standard of paying more than 30% of their monthly income on housing costs here. Digging into who that population really is, we see that 11% of those cost-burdened households are veterans, 24% of those households are seniors, and then 61% of those cost-burdened households are renters. So we're seeing that particularly fall on the rental side of the market, consistent with some of the housing price increases we've heard and seen. And then finally, we also see that about 39% of those cost-burdened households are not only paying 30% of their income on housing, but they are both low income and paying actually more than 50% of their income on housing costs, which makes them particularly vulnerable to more housing price changes and displacement. So we can look at how this varies in the different jurisdictions, and you'll see pretty similar numbers up on the board. A similar share of overall residents that are cost burdened in Reno, a little slightly higher, but again, similar share of veterans, a similar share of seniors, slightly more on the rental side, and then again, a similar sense of the severity of the housing insecurity problem at 36%. Then when you look at Sparks, while it's overall a slightly smaller percentage of the residents that are cost burdened, there's actually a higher percentage of those that are housing insecure. So while the total number affected is slightly smaller, those that are affected are facing a more severe affordability issue. We're also seeing higher rates of veterans and seniors that are affected, but also it's a more split between renters and homeowners in the Sparks rather than the other jurisdictions. So then I'm going to turn it back over to Chris to talk about what we've heard about what the region can do about these issues today and where they may need to go in the future.
Thanks, Ann. And one of the things we wanted to do in undertaking this effort is do a SWOT analysis to understand where the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats lie in the region, so that we can then better understand and strategize around how to address some of those challenges. So in terms of strengths, just the kind of strengths and weaknesses both, these are things that typically the stakeholders in the region have the power to address or to change. So looking at the increased urgency in community conversation around affordable housing since the forum in 2017, has been this increased urgency around that conversation. You have strong state level resources that can be leveraged in supportive of the regional efforts. In terms of weaknesses, we know that in looking at the policies currently available in the region compared to other regions, that it's limited. There's not a lot of policies to really incentivize affordable housing development and address the needs of the residents. And so part of this conversation and part of this effort is really to help build a toolbox that's going to be supportive of the affordable housing strategies developed for the region, as well as some of the funding mechanisms that the region is currently not taking advantage of that can be brought to bear to this effort as well. And opportunities or threats, these are things that we want to be aware of so that we can strategize and plan for them. This is a 10-year housing plan. We know that some of these things aren't going to be able to address in the near term, but these are things on the long-term horizon that we can begin to address and strategize and prepare for. So in doing this, we wanted to also look at what programs are currently available within the region across both Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County. And so these are some typical programs and products that a lot of jurisdictions, either through federal funding or local or state resources, administer and to deliver affordable housing to the market. And so you can see across the region, these programs and these products are currently available. So the capacity is here to leverage those programs to deliver more units if there's a broader policy toolbox, if there's additional funding resources that could be brought to support this effort. In terms of policy and financing tools, this is where it was really stood out for us in doing this analysis and preparing for this trip, that when we look at some of the typical, I want to be clear, these aren't things that we're recommending. These are typical policies or financing tools that are available in other jurisdictions, and we compare that to what's currently available in Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County. You can see there's a limited number of tools and policies and funding mechanisms that can be used to support affordable housing. So part of the conversation is how do we begin to integrate policy, strategy, and funding, both current and leveraging new tools and new policies that could really help address the trends that Ann just highlighted, the shortage of affordable housing, the level of cost burden in the region, to really bring to bear some more diverse housing options and opportunities for the residents of Truckee Meadows. So one of the things we wanted to support this effort was a strong planning structure to really guide and drive this process. And so we're happy to share with you today that we kicked off that effort. We had great conversations with the executive leadership team that we put together in coordination with TMRPA and TMHC to really support this effort. And we have a cross-jurisdictional representation on that planning structure. And just to kind of give you a visual of what the planning structure is designed to do, the executive leadership team is really representatives from leadership across all three jurisdictions. And we really wanted to bring that unit together so that all the tough policy questions, the strategy conversations, the funding recommendations can then be acted upon. And so we wanted to make sure that that group had the power and authority to act on those recommendations. The working group and the working groups, both the staff working group and the community working group, are really going to debate and strategize around what are the priorities for the region, what programs, strategies, and funding and policy tools should we be suggesting to the executive leadership team that are really going to help support the overall affordable housing effort. And so those conversations have yet to happen, but we had a great kickoff this morning with the executive leadership team, got a lot of great feedback and participation and input that are really going to help shape and frame both the vision for the regional housing plan as well as some of the core principles that are going to guide this effort overall. And so just to kind of give you some of the confirmed members of the executive leadership team, again, representatives from Washoe County, the City of Reno, City of Sparks, Nevada State Legislature, Nevada Housing Division, Reno Housing Authority, EDON, RTC, as well as Renown Health, have all confirmed members of the executive leadership team. So today, we ended up developing a vision statement that's really going to guide and provide a vision for the affordable housing plan for over the next 10 years. And this is the vision statement that was prepared. It's a draft vision statement right now, but this is where the conversation with the executive leadership team landed not too long ago, a couple of hours ago. And I think it really sets a great foundation to build on to support this effort going forward. In addition to that, as you can see, we got a lot accomplished in the hour-long we had with the executive leadership team. We also drafted some core principles that are really going to guide the regional housing plan as well. And this is really insightful for us because I think it really, not only were these on target with the trends and data that Ann just presented, but it also helps shape the policy, strategy, and funding framework that's really going to support this effort long-term. So I think the executive leadership team did a really great job of honing in on some of these core principles to really identify what's needed in the region and lay out a plan to get there. So this was really impactful for us, and I think really sets a great foundation to build off as we continue to engage with the executive leadership team, continue to engage with the working groups, and really hone in on the strategies that are going to be in the plan. Just to kind of give you a sample of some of the policy strategies and financing that we're going to be discussing with the working groups as well as the executive leadership team. These are things that came through our conversations with various stakeholders in preparing for this trip. And we know that these are the topics and some of the policy strategies and financing mechanisms that we're going to be discussing with the working group and executive leadership team over the course of this project. And coincidentally, this just came in that in one of those policy conversations we've been talking about and hearing about is the role of inclusionary zoning within the region. And so this is from the city of Reno that asked that be discussed through this process and vetted through this process to see what is the role of inclusionary housing within the region and how can that help support not only the strategies but the policy tools, but ultimately bring more affordable housing to the Truckee Meadows region. So we're very excited about this. This is really important. Just to lay out a timeline in terms of the first phase of this work, as I outlined before, we're going to be working and coordinating with TMRPA and TMHC to schedule the rest of these meetings. But again, this trip was about to kick off. The next several trips are going to be really honing in on the needs, the trends, the priorities that are going to inform the strategy roadmap under phase 2. And so we have a schedule tentatively outlined here that's going to involve several more trips and engagement with the executive leadership team, as well as the working groups to really hone in on those things. And we'll be back to present roughly about June 2018 to the board some of the outcomes of phase 1 and the priorities that have been developed to support phase 2 and phase 3. That's our presentation. Thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the board to Mr. Kizzy or Ms. Jordan? It's a lot to take in. Thank you very much for that. And we have some public comment from a number of partners in this effort, which we're glad to have with us. And I just want to express my appreciation to all the partners in this effort, particularly the state. Certainly Senator Ratty with her Housing Committee during the interim, the legislative piece as we prepare for the next legislative session. If we have to go back to the legislature looking for more tools, that'll be great. And particularly the Governor's Office of Economic Development. It's great to have their partnership. But with that, let's go right into the public comment. We have Ms. Nancy Brown. After that, we'll have Mr. Kevin Dick.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity for public comment. My name is Nancy Brown. I'm from Charles Schwab Bank Community Development. I'm so excited. This initiative started over a year ago, and it started from the community. It started from private business, saying we have to do something differently about affordable housing. I've been in Nevada for 40 years. I was on the Planning Commission just before the crash. A planning committee on affordable housing, and we came up with some plans that were never implemented. So I'm really excited. We have worked with Charles Schwab Bank, with enterprise communities for 15 years that we've been in business, and And so we're really proud to be able to help support, to bring them here. We'll continue to support this effort financially. And me, I'm dedicated as a staff member for Schwab to volunteer my hours to participate. So I want to thank the Regional Planning Governor Board for standing up and listening and accepting. And I really encourage you to help move this forward and make it truly a regional plan. So thank you for your time and your interest.
Great, thank you. We'll welcome next Mr. Kevin Dick, followed by Jimmy Stryker.
Thank you. I'm Kevin Dick. I'm the District Health Officer, and I'm co-chair of Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities. And I'd like to thank the board, all of you, for your support of this initiative with Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities and Enterprise. And wanted to also thank Ms. Robinson and her staff and all the incredible data and expertise in our land use and land planning in the region that the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency provides in support of this effort, which has helped move Enterprise along in the first phase of their project. I'd also like to recognize the Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities team that's worked to support this initiative. Nancy Brown, who just spoke, actually came to our steering committee a little over a year ago and proposed that we get involved and start holding some forums on housing. And that's what's moved us forward to where we are today with Enterprise being engaged in this project. And I wanted to acknowledge Sharon Zadra, our director, and the work that she has done to coordinate and manage this project moving forward. The stable and affordable housing is critical for the health of our community. My co-chair and colleague, Dr. Slonim, is going to talk a little bit more about the importance of housing, but I just would note that we recently finished conducting a community health needs assessment in collaboration with Renown, and we had a community meeting of subject matter experts in public health to talk about and identify, out of all of the needs that we have for public health in our community, what are our public health priorities that we should be focusing on in focus areas. And housing came out number one from that discussion of about 80 different subject matter experts that were involved. And so we're continuing to work to make this project a success. We're working on fundraising for the additional phases. As Chris acknowledged, we got the leadership team kicked off this morning, and we'll be working with work groups and advocacy around this issue. But we think this is a great opportunity for our region, opportunity to incorporate the results into the regional plan that you're developing, and it will provide many programs and policies for our government entities to use to address affordable housing moving forward. So, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Jimmy Stryker, followed by Dr. Slonim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Jimmy Straisner, Regional Administrator for the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. I wanted to come by today and voice our support for this regional strategic plan. My region is well, I'm based in California, but Nevada is my region, and I have recently traveled all over my region and talking to local electeds and local stakeholders about some of the issues and housing that they're facing, and affordable housing is if not the number one issue that every community is going through a tough time right now in that area. And I want to say that HUD is an agency that does work on affordable housing, but it's not only HUD working on this issue. It's the local communities and the local stakeholders in every region is responsible to come together and to put these plans together and execute those plans for their communities. And I just think this is a great partnership and a great thing that you guys have with Enterprise here, and we couldn't be more proud to participate, and we encourage this board and everybody in this community to support it going forward. So thank you for your time, Chairman. I appreciate it, and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the support. Dr. Tony Slonim.
Good afternoon, and thank you. My name is Dr. Anthony Sloan. I'm the President and CEO of Renown Health. Round Health has a long and sustained history of involvement, both monetarily and in substance, to address the issues of affordable housing in our community. We will continue to do so. As a physician and public health professional myself, I am personally and professionally involved in no fewer than 3 or 4 committees that are involved with the issues of affordable housing because of its underpinning in health and the health status of our community. Unfortunately, that has led to a variety of people with conflicting ideas about what we need to do to sustain housing over time. Today, I am also here as the co-chair of the Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities, a not-for-profit organization made up of approximately 25 or so other not-for-profit community member organizations who aim to make Northern Nevada a healthy community by 2025. We recognize the important and substantial underpinnings between housing insecurity and one's overall health status. We also know that affordable housing is a marker for other social determinants like food deprivation, poverty, and many markers of poor health. This enterprise comprehensive effort is distinct from most prior activities in that it has the support of various community partners, both public and private, and integrates the work across, as far as I can tell, maybe 7 or 8 distinct groups around the community working on these issues. It is comprehensive, it is a regional approach, and aims for long-term resolution. Housing that is affordable is a regional issue that is growing exponentially with serious consequences that affect us all. Therefore, we need to remain committed to developing a long-term strategy and implementation plan. This partnership between TMRPA, the Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities, and Enterprise can and is representing all community parties and interests. We arrived at this condition together, and I know we can solve it together. We can all share in the success when we get there. This type of opportunity to align and resolve does not come about very often. We share the responsibility to bring policy and programs to address our regional need for housing that is affordable for the short and long term across multiple populations. I believe in this partnership and strategy. It requires our collective resources and support, and at Renown Health and Truckee Meadows Healthy Communities, we are continuing to provide that for the long term. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Slonim, and we appreciate Renown's partnership on this. Okay, do we have any further public comment on item 7A? Seeing none, we'll move now to item 7B, public hearing, Regional Plan Amendment RPA 17-002, consideration and possible action to adopt RPGB Resolution 18-01 regarding an amendment to the Truckee Meadows Service Areas, TMSA, and the Cooperative Planning Area as indicated on Map 7, transferring 6 parcels totaling approximately 83.03 acres from the City of Reno's portion of the TMSA to Washoe County's portion of the TMSA on a site located east of South Virginia Street, south of Town Drive, and north of Rhodes Road. To my fellow commission members, I think the expedient way to conduct this, since we do have a lot of public comment on this matter, we'll hear from Ms. Knox first for a presentation. I'd ask that we hold questions. And then we go into public comment, and then we can have deliberation and questions to get to the issue. So with that, welcome Ms. Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Lauren Knox, Regional Planning. This agenda item discusses the Steamboat Meadows TMSA amendment and can be found starting on page 15 of your packet. So before we get into the proposed amendment, I just want to provide a quick overview of the Truckee Meadows Service Area, or TMSA. Per the regional plan, the TMSA is defined as the areas within which municipal services and infrastructure will be provided. This includes the high-intensity core areas and the existing and planned urban and suburban uses. The regional plan allows the TMSA to be amended to include new land, remove land, or to move land from one jurisdiction to another. This can occur through a sponsorship by the local government or through a private property owner request, which requires the RPC to sponsor the amendment. Additionally, there are policies within the regional plan and the Regional Planning Governing Board regulations on procedure that govern the process and requirements for a TMSA amendment to occur. All right, let's move on to the specific request. To provide some background, in June of 2017, staff received a private property owner application requesting to amend the TMSA. The application requests to amend the TMSA by transferring a site from the City of Reno TMSA to Washoe County's portion of the TMSA. Currently, the site is within Reno's sphere of influence and has not been annexed into the City of Reno. The site is about 83 acres total, and of that, only about 67.5 acres are considered developable due to the presence of development constraint area on site. The identified development constraint area is an AE floodway, which follows the Steamboat Creek that traverses the site. All in all, this amendment seeks to ultimately alter the jurisdictional authority of the site. All right, so let's take a look at the site. This map will provide some context regionally and can be found on page 25 of your packet. As you can see, this site is located in the southern portion of the TMSA, south of Geiger Grade and Mount Rose Highway. If we get in a little bit closer, you can see that the site is east of South Virginia, or Old Highway 395, and is directly adjacent to the Washoe County TMSA. This map is also available on page 23 of your packet. I also want to point out that the original application did not contain one of the parcels on the eastern portion of the site. However, this application was amended to include that parcel, which is approximately 3 acres in size. So this item was initially brought before the Regional Planning Commission in August for a potential sponsorship, in which the RPC chose to sponsor the amendment, which ultimately allowed staff to begin processing the amendment. As part of the process, the item was then transmitted to the affected local jurisdictions for an advisory recommendation, which included the City of Reno and Washoe County. The Reno City Council heard the item and voted to not support the amendment and instead support an effort for a joint plan or a more detailed analysis during the regional plan update about the property's appropriateness in the city's sphere of influence. The Washoe County Board of County Commission voted to support the amendment and would like to have a larger discussion regarding the TMSA capacity in the regional plan update. Following transmittal to the local governments with the information that staff has received from the applicant, the City of Reno and Washoe County, staff prepared an analysis of the amendment for the Regional Planning Commission and the Regional Planning Governing Board, which is the topic of this agenda item. During a public hearing on January 24th of 2018, the RPC voted unanimously to recommend approval to this body. The public hearing by this board is the final step in the TMSA process. So before we get into the review factors, I just want to provide a quick overview of the Washoe County TMSA as it pertains to this request. Policy 1.1.7.1 describes a calculation for determining the acreage allowance within each jurisdiction's portion of the TMSA. If the jurisdiction's portion of the TMSA as calculated is exhausted, Policy 1.1.7.3 allows for development flexibility acreage. This was a one-time 640-acre allotment given to each jurisdiction. With this request, Washoe County is willing to utilize the development flexibility acreage defined in Policy 1.1.7.3. Per agency records, the allowed development flexibility acreage available to Washoe County at this time is 165.2 acres. As stated earlier, the net acreage of this request is 67.5 acres. Washoe County is able and willing to utilize their TMSA capacity for this request, and if approved, Washoe County would have about 98 acres left for future use. All right, in terms of the review, the Regional Planning Governing Board Regulations on Procedure, Section 2B6, defines agreed upon criteria for which TMSA amendments are evaluated. Additionally, Policy 4.3.6 of the Regional Plan requires the review factors listed on the slide overhead to be analyzed in regards to any regional plan amendment. As a tool to better analyze TMSA amendments, an evaluation matrix based on the evaluation criteria is used, and this matrix really provides a score for TMSA amendments. This request resulted in a relatively high score due to the fact that the site is already within the TMSA and that this request will simply alter the jurisdiction of the property. Also, the criteria in the matrix and the review factors of Policy 4.3.6 generally overlap. The full analysis was included as part of your staff report, but for this presentation, I'll briefly touch on each of these topics. So in terms of regional form and pattern, the site is currently within the TMSA and is essentially requesting to alter jurisdictions to be solely within Washoe County's purview and is adjacent to Washoe County's portion of the TMSA boundary. Also, it is directly adjacent to existing residential areas. The proposed site is again directly adjacent to existing residential areas. The material submitted indicates that eventually the applicant would like to seek additional residential development on the site. This would be a separate request at a later time, but it does just provide some context. In terms of the jobs housing balance, since the site has been master planned with the City of Reno since 2002, staff does not anticipate a significant shift in the jobs housing balance. Again, this amendment is seeking to alter jurisdiction of the site. Thus, the potential for development with this request would not alter significantly. So in terms of the availability, timing, and phasing of infrastructure, again, the amendment site is already within the TMSA, which means the area has been contemplated for municipal services and infrastructure. The site has been in the TMSA since the TMSA's inception, which was in 2002, and it's also adjacent to existing infrastructure and services. For water, the site is within the Steamboat Springs Waterworks Incorporated service area per the Regional Water Management Plan, and the provider has indicated that they're willing to serve the site. For wastewater, the site is within the South Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility service area, as indicated by the Regional Water Management Plan, and additionally, there are sewer pipes present on site. There are existing roadways adjacent to the site. If this site were to be developed, additional improvements may be required and would be reviewed at a later time in the development review process. Information provided by the Washoe County School District indicates that the site is served by Pleasant Valley Elementary School, DePauli Middle School, and DeMonte Ranch High School. Again, if the site were to be developed, school capacity would be reviewed at a later time in the development review process if a project were to move forward. Again, as this amendment is seeking to change the jurisdiction, it's not anticipated to negatively affect service levels or affect the overall regional priorities for the provision of services. In terms of the services on site now, Washoe County already provides sewer service, surrounding roadways, sheriff's service, and the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District serves the site. In terms of natural resources, the Steamboat Creek currently traverses the site. This is an AE floodway, and it's associated with the creek, which is considered a development constraint area per the regional plan. Per regional plan policy 2.2.1, development is limited in these DCA areas. Also, as discussed in the Regional Water Management Plan, the channels and banks of the Steamboat Creek contain mercury. The mercury does not threaten drinking water, however, there are concerns regarding any stream restoration work. Additionally, steamboat buckwheat, which is a federally endangered plant species, is located on site. It's important to point out that these natural resource constraints would be present and need to be dealt with if future development of the site occurs, regardless of whether or not this property was within the City of Reno or Washoe County's jurisdiction, which is what this amendment ultimately considers. So there's another piece I want to point out regarding this amendment. The subject site is currently subject to the cooperative planning as it's within the City of Reno expanded sphere of influence 2002 to 2006 as depicted on map 7 of the regional plan and further defined in policy 4.2.4 of the regional plan. If this amendment is approved, the subject site will no longer be within the cooperative planning area. As discussed in policy 1.2.17 of the regional plan, lands added to Washoe County's portion of the TMSA after 2006 shall not be subject to the cooperative planning process. A larger conversation about cooperative planning is not agendized for this meeting. However, we just wanted to bring this potential removal to your attention. So again, the TMSA evaluation criteria, as noted in section 2B6 of the Regional Planning Governing Board Regulation on Procedure, and the 6 factors above were analyzed for this proposal, and both staff and the Regional Planning Commission recommend that the RPGB adopt the amendment as described in the staff report and today's presentation. A motion can be found overhead and on page 22 of your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions. We also have the applicant's representative, City of Reno staff, and Washoe County staff available for questions as well.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Knox. And I think what we'll do is I have 10 cards ahead of me for public comment, and what I'll do, similar to what I did in the last item, is I'll call up the first speaker, and then I'll call the next speaker up. And so when your name is called as the next speaker, if you could come down and sit in the front row so you're ready to go, we'll be able to get and move through this. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Garrett Gordon, followed by Mike Schuler.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. For the record, Garrett Gordon, today representing Curtis and Judy Coulter, who live on Rhodes Road. So the big question is, over the last few days, do the residents support this development in the county? Well, it may be true that there have been communications, both verbally, via emails, probably a text or two, about supporting the county development with a 25-home transition area. There's been 5 significant events that have occurred since those communications. Number 1, the applicant failed to meet with us to discuss this regional plan amendment and the initiation process. There was supposed to be a collaborative effort. And 2, a tentative map layout. We were left in the dark and not heard anything since the application was pulled from the City of Reno agenda for 291 homes back in May. 2, it was never disclosed that the regional plan amendment would remove the property from map 7 of the cooperative planning area. That, in fact, would eliminate Reno's participation and Reno's input. Would also allow for clustering from undeveloped property, say Steamboat Creek, into the 25-home transition area. That cooperative planning removal is very important to my clients. Number 3, there were some incorrect statements made in the applicant's application. If I turn you to page 48 of your staff report, it says, the applicant is stating that the city's master plan designations are consistent with the existing county zoning. This is not correct. While there is definitely some overlap, the city's master plan land use designations take Steamboat Creek into consideration, while Washos do not. That's one of our positions, is it would make sense to keep this property in cooperative plan, given there's considerations that both Washoe County and Reno would have. Finally, number 4, and this is one of the most important points we have, is the applicant forum shopped the initiation of this regional plan amendment by going to the Reno Regional Planning Commission. We understood they would go back to the City of Reno. This is the City of Reno sphere. Ask the City of Reno whether or not they would initiate their own process to pull it out of the sphere, where we could have a discussion with residents, have a workshop, potentially have a more public process. Or I would submit to you, they would come to you and say, would this body, this elected body, initiate this regional plan update process, which again would allow us to have a seat at the table and talked about conditions and terms for that initiation. However, now, myself, personally, and also my clients are in this difficult position of now trying to choose who we would participate with in order to develop this property. So I would submit to you the answer is what the City of Reno recommended. City of Reno City Council unanimously recommended to vote to not support this proposed regional plan amendment in order to take in consideration community character, flood mitigation, geothermal activity, and other issues. So we'd ask you please to not support the regional plan amendment today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have Mike Schuler, followed by Marika Becken.
Hi, my name is Mike Schuler. I live at 2215 Rhodes Road. And last year, I got to know quite a few of my neighbors real well due to the flood, and I was on my tractor for days on end helping protect their homes. And I currently own 2 homes in the valley adjacent to each other, and they comprise 61 acres. On those 61 acres, I've got 50 to 60 head of cattle. And to support those cattle, I've got a supplemental well, which clearly depends upon the water aquifer in the valley. And I'm concerned with this development because it will take water out of the aquifer and jeopardize my operation. And I just request that this be kept within the Reno sphere of influence. Thank you.
Thank you. Marika Becken, followed by Mike Raley.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The whole concept of the sphere of influence has long been a concern to many Washoe County residents. The residents outside the city limits generally choose their homes for the rural environment. It seems somehow wrong for the city government, whom we do not get to elect to control our lands. But when a developer who had previously requested annexation into the city has pulled that request and is now pursuing the opposite extreme of removing them totally from the sphere of influence, it makes one wonder about the benefit to that developer of having the land external to city control. I can think of a number of reasons for the decision. Some have to do with the provisions of utilities and services, a concern that's been raised by the city previously from a fiscal perspective, but one that immediately comes to our minds is the potential for density transfer under county rules. As you no doubt know, much of the area of the parcels to be developed is not buildable, or at least not easily buildable. The county rules, but not the city rules, allow for the density to be transferred. This means that the developer can build a very dense housing community on small lots. This is common in the city and indeed may be attractive to someone who values a large home but doesn't want a lot of yard to take care of. But the lands we're talking about today are meant to be a transition zone from the properties of this type seen north of Highway 341 and the rural parcels to the south. As such, homes there would generally be expected to be built on lots of around an acre. Cluster development is not appropriate in this transition area, and that's what the move to put it in the Washoe, take it out of the sphere and put it under Washoe County jurisdiction seems to be about from the developer's perspective. I have further concerns about the plans to put in so many homes as the developer will be proposing in the future. For example, I understand that the Steamboat Water Company is supporting the proposed and plans to sell water, no doubt pumped groundwater. In the last drought, many area residents had to deepen their wells at a considerable expense. With global climate change, droughts are expected to be longer and more frequent. This is not the time to be significantly increasing the groundwater demand in the meadows. I ask that the Commission affirm the City of Reno's recommendation to keep the property within the sphere so that it can remain in the cooperative planning area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mike Raley, followed by Rick Blake.
Good afternoon. For the record, Mike Raley with Rubicon Design Group, representing the applicant. I'd like to give you a little history of how we got here today. As you know, the project site is within the City of Reno sphere of influence. We applied for entitlements, being a master plan amendment, zone change, and annexation to the City of Reno. As that project moved through the process, we realized that there were some significant concerns from the neighbors to the south in the Steamboat area. We actually postponed our master plan amendment and zoning portion of that application and attempted to move forward with the annexation. After meeting individually with Reno City Council members, it was made very clear to us that there was no appetite for annexation of the property at this time due to inability to serve, basically stretching services too thin, the fact that it was at the very southern tip of the city and it would tax city services. Also, as part of that process, we had a neighborhood meeting, a neighborhood advisory board meeting, and individual meetings with some of the residents. It was made very clear to us that they felt that this piece of property belonged in the county and not in the city. It was stated time and time again in meetings that this property should be subject to the provisions of the area of the South Valley's area plan. We said, okay, we understand that. We voluntarily withdrew our annexation application and moved forward with a regional plan amendment to put it back into the county. Mr. Gordon claims that we forum shopped that process, and I would disagree with that. We simply followed the process for a private property owner to request removal from the sphere, as outlined in the regional plan, as outlined on their application form. We did not forum shop anything. We got the sponsorship of the Regional Planning Commission to move forward with that amendment, and it went to the County Commission and to the City Council for comment. At this point, there is no project to be considered. There's not a tentative map layout because one does not exist. We are simply trying to figure out what jurisdiction will review a future tentative map, and at that time, we'll have a whole other series of public input, public meetings, neighborhood meetings, individual meetings. But at this point, we simply do not have anything to discuss until we know what jurisdiction will be reviewing our map and to what standards we will be designing to. I kind of refer to it as we're in a jurisdictional black hole right now. We don't know if we're in the city, we don't know if we're in the county, and we need some direction on how to move forward. And that's why we are here today. We are not proposing a housing development at this time. We will come forward with a project in the future, but at this point, there is no project to discuss. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. We may come back to you. Mr. Rick Blake, followed by Kathy Brandhorst. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Kathy Brandhorst, followed by Petra Ross, who, I'm sorry, has just submitted comments for the record. So after that, it'll be Ms. Judy Coulter.
My name is Kathy Brandhorst, and I am the United States President. I am going to be talking about the South Virginia Street, and what is located on that is my barns were stolen, and they turned them into the businesses, and these were restaurants and bar businesses. And they have not been returned, my barns, for my animals, and they were supposed to have been returned a long time ago. And I hope you're not going to be putting any houses in that area either,
Ms.
because
Brandhorst,
those...
if you could keep your comments specific to.
I
item
am
7B.
talking on South Virginia Street. You have this located east of South Virginia Street. And that's what I'm going to be talking on. I would like to have my barns back on my property. And I know the people in the house right there, that's my house. But those people have been evicted from my house, and they haven't been moved out yet. They don't even belong on the property at all. They have been charged embezzlement too, because they don't have businesses on that property at all. Those barns belong to me, and they have not been returned to my property. You turn them into businesses on that property, and those businesses have had nothing but complaints after complaints, complaints, and complaints. Because you shoot people down from the restaurants, you shoot people down in the bars, and you expect that to be continued in my area? I hope not. It needs to be straightened up. It needs to be taken care of, because I'm not going to have my animals shot down in the middle of the street because they have no barn to go to. You need to take down those businesses and take them out of there. Those are not restaurants. They are not bars for you to be shooting down the people that actually you call customers. And you know what? You're selling guns illegally from my house, and that has never been there either.
Okay, thank you. We have a comment card from Ms. Petter-Ross that'll be entered into the record. Does not wish to speak, but did fill out the card. Thank you for that. Calling up Ms. Judy Coulter, followed by Mr. Russell James.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Judy Coulter. I live on Rhodes Road in the Steamboat Valley. The struggle that the Truckee Meadows is facing during this time of extreme growth can't be any less than overwhelming to our community leaders who are trying to achieve some sort of balance with a bird's eye view. Although I understand property owners have certain rights to build on their land, the same consideration should also be given to property owners whose lives are impacted by disruption, growth, not to mention the fact that some growth is not in keeping with the character of their community. When Washoe County, City of Reno, and City of Sparks reached an agreement on land allocation, the transition property in question landed in the Reno sphere of influence. The property was to serve as a transition zone from the rural property south of Rhodes Road to the more urban and suburban environment to the north of Town Road and the Mount Rose Highway. The zoning on this property currently reflects the necessary and reasonable transition from rural environment in the Steamboat Valley to higher density and more suburban lifestyles to the north, and even the urban areas further north. In addition to existing residents, citizens from the entire Truckee Meadows, Reno, and Sparks use the Steamboat Valley for cycling, hiking, and equestrian activities. The valley services the community with open space, a country-like environment that provides valuable quality of life experiences to children and adults. The Steamboat Valley community has recently been targeted for development in several areas. The residents have collectively navigated some of the strategies of builders and developers, and we have learned about some of the issues that can arise. When my husband and I moved to the Steamboat Valley, we had no idea that zoning on county land allowed for transfer of density from one parcel of land to another. We never did anticipate that a developer could set site on a piece of rural property and have the potential to completely change the character of a community for profit, put an endangered species at risk, deplete an aquifer system, or completely change the character of an area from rural to urban without a reasonable transition. There are people saying that the residents of Steamboat do not want this land developed within the city. However, it was the developer who pulled the application from the city on the day it was to be heard. Now it's being said that the residents do not want the land developed in the county. The reality is that the residents of Steamboat have had only one objective, which is to see this transitional parcel remain as it was originally intended. I request that you leave it in the cooperative planning area so that it can be determined by all three jurisdictions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Russell James, followed by, we have one more card that just came in. I do have another card that I'll mention that was just a comment.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Regional Planning Governing Board. Good afternoon. My name is Russ James. I live at 300 Rhodes Road, which is directly across from the proposed Steamboat Meadows project. I want to quickly review how it is that we are before you today. This would probably be from the residents' point of view, which might be a little bit different. A little over a year ago, the applicant presented a project to the Ward 2 Neighborhood Advisory Board. Let me repeat that again. The applicant presented a project to the Ward 2 Neighborhood Advisory Board. The project included zoning changes with density increases that are far beyond what is currently found in the Steamboat Valley. As you can imagine, the residents voiced their opposition to bring subdivision-type living in our very rural valley. The developer agreed to a meeting with a small group of residents from the valley to try to mitigate some of the issues. Those issues of main concern were density, transition of density, transfer of density, and the points of access. The developer then proceeded with his process without any attempt to make any of the issues palatable to the residents. The applicant ended up before the Reno City Council for annexation. The applicant then pulled the annexation request from the agenda, and it was never heard. Now we are here, and the applicant is seeking a jurisdictional change. The concerns of the citizens have not changed. The applicant has still made no attempts at addressing them. A request to be removed from this sphere because a developer is not getting what he wants is not a valid reason to remove the property from the sphere. From the Nevada revised statutes, sphere of influence is an area in which a city plans to expand a sphere within the next 20 years. Does anybody actually think that'll take 20 years? Not with what's going on in Reno today. This property is clearly a transition area from a suburban to rural. The original zoning is commendable in that they provided the entire pasture area as 1-acre lots, used the creek and the geothermal area to transition to more density. The original zoning got it exactly right. We are asking that you leave this property in the Reno sphere of influence with an eye towards joint planning. This seems like a situation that the joint planning was created for, so both entities can have their input. Please vote to have this piece of property remain in the sphere, moving towards joint planning. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. I'll recognize we have a card from Ed and Lori Smith, who provided written comments but do not wish to speak. Do we have any further requests to speak?
Was this, yeah, Jim Richards, was this for this item? Jim Richards, yeah.
Okay. Please come forward.
Afternoon. Jim Richards. I live in the South Truckee Meadows area, and I'm just here to express my opinion about this expansion that we are facing here in Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County. Somewhere has come upon us that we have to provide for 100,000 more residents in Reno, Sparks area. First of all, I ask, why do we have to provide 100,000 people that aren't even here yet? Let's just deal with the people that are here right now and take care of the infrastructure, roads, quality of life, water, and everything else. Where's the water going to come from all these people in the North Valleys and South Valleys? Where the road's going to come? Right now, we have traffic congestions as it is, the North Valleys, through the neighborhoods, just to get out to the Tesla environment. I just feel that these expansion things are just getting too much at one time for people that aren't even here yet. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I believe, wait for Ms. Robinson. She's bustling back over here. I believe we have a number of comments that were submitted for the record, and if you could just acknowledge those, that way we'll have them included in the record.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to. We have 4 different communications we've received from between February 6th, 7th, and 8th. These have been received from Jamie Picari, Robert Field, and Kim Olson-Wilson. These have been acknowledged and will be put into the record.
Okay, thank you so much. So with that, we'll bring it back to the board for questions and deliberation. We have Ms. Breckus dialing back in. I think we had her for a portion of this agenda item, got dropped, now we're getting her back on, so that's happening.
I'm on.
Welcome back, okay. Questions from the board?
I have 2.
Councilman Breckus.
Okay, and I apologize if these were discussed when I was dropped. The first question is for Ms., I think it was Ms. Knox who presented. She said something about original, and it's referenced in the staff report in the discussion in regional foreman pattern, and it said that essentially approval of this request would involve 2 Reno sphere of influence islands, which we know is a setup for either annexation, islands of incorporation islands, or prevents incorporation. But then she said the amendment was later, the request was later amended to put one of those back in. Could she elaborate on that and state if there was a correction in the staff report then? Is there just one now, one island?
Absolutely. It's 2 different things. There were actually initially 3 islands, one of which was a 3-acre parcel. The other 2 are much smaller sliver parcels. So the 3-acre parcel was then included into the amendment. So that one was taken care of. The other 2 were not included in the amendment, so they would still exist. They were taken for account in the TMSA evaluation matrix. It did drop the point value given to the project, but overall those 2 would still exist.
Okay, so we've got an island situation. The other question is about Steamboat Creek, and we know it traverses south to north. Reno recently approved a project, I think it's an apartment complex project, that also is along the Steamboat Creek water course. What is that true that that project is to the north of that and is currently going under staff analysis and then into the building phase? And what is there intervening parcels if I've got the landscape correct in my mind?
Councilwoman Breckus, I believe Claudia Hansen from the city of Reno is going to answer that.
Thank you. Claudia Hansen, Planning Manager. Yes, that apartment project you're referring to is located north of this, so downstream, and they designed it in such a way that they are preserving the creek, which is located on the west side of the apartment complex.
Are the 2 properties adjacent, or is one of those, what's in between that property and this subject property?
Oh, it's quite a bit of distance between the 2.
A couple of intervening properties?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Councilman McKenzie.
Thank you. And staff report talks about the scoring process here, and it says that the score is relatively high in comparison to previous proposals. What proposals are we talking about?
So that's in comparison to all other TMSA amendment proposals. If you look on attachment, I believe it's 9, let me find it really quickly. So attachment 9 on page 79 of your packet, it has every single TMSA amendment that we've received and what those scores were.
Okay, so this is already in the TMSA, so most of the findings that you've made here, you're saying that just because it's still in the TMSA, that finding's there. I would argue that maybe this shouldn't be in the TMSA because there's a bunch of findings here that I don't think are applicable to this piece of property. And when we're talking about scoring it highly, if we're just saying just because it's in the TMSA, we're going to give it a good score on this, I don't know that that's appropriate. Mike, I had a question for pertaining to the two island properties as well. So what kind of obstacles does that create for the people that own those properties if they decide they want to do something? They're not contiguous, so they can't annex now. So this actually is affecting property owners that aren't involved at all. If it's taken out of the sphere of influence, those properties they can't do anything with them.
Right, one of the properties is actually a Washoe County, just a small utility parcel. And then the other property, it is a small, I believe it's 1,000 square feet. And with that, they would have to come in for a TMSA amendment as well, or they can ask the city to sponsor an amendment to clean that up, or the county.
Okay. So how did we make a finding of housing and job balance on this property to begin with, to bring it in TMSA? Because this property doesn't have a housing job balance on it. It's not going to change with the change of the sphere, but the commercial property on this is pretty much undevelopable.
Yeah, so when this was initially brought into the TMSA, it was back in 2002, and it was during an update process. So basically, the cities and the counties, they were looking at all of the land together, and so it wasn't done on a parcel or site analysis. It was an overall area.
So where's the nearest commercial property to this that you get a job balance for? Because, I mean, we don't know what they're going to build for housing, so we don't know whether the housing there is going to fit what's available for jobs in that area or not. So how do we say there's a balance?
Correct. It's difficult because it is already in the TMSA, and so we're not looking at a specific development type. This particular, what's existing on the site now does have some commercial ability. There is general commercial zoning as it exists now, as well as housing. That with this request is not anticipated to shift. So that is how that finding was met.
Okay, and then the provision of water, you say that the water is available with a private water company. Has the state engineer authorized that water company to expand services?
That I cannot speak to. They are, the Steamboat Springs Waterworks Incorporated is an identified utility, and so they are within the regional water management plan as being a water provider. I believe that there are some requirements that they would have to go to, but they have indicated that they are willing to serve the site and that they can. And they provided a letter to that available.
So we don't know that we have an availability of water here or not, and the fact that it is groundwater, and that groundwater is affecting the groundwater of the unincorporated residents down there who are dependent upon their groundwater for not only irrigation of their land, but for the water for their house as well. This, by increasing this, we may adversely affect those. And that's something that, I mean, again, how did we bring it in TMSA given the fact that we didn't really have a plan for water for it? And then we've got a lot of different infrastructure issues down there that we seem to say we've got covered here. But my concern is that now we're asking the one entity in the county within this group that doesn't observe concurrency in their planning, that doesn't have it in their planning process, that we're asking them to make sure that there's concurrency on this property, and there's a lot of things that are going to require concurrency. And to me, that this board can't leave that decision out there until they've come into the fold and agree that they're going to practice concurrency. I have a question about the fire. I know that as an undeveloped property, that Truckee Meadow Fire provides fire service, but did you take into consideration the automatic aid law that was passed by the legislature, which requires the closest engine to respond? As I understand, that doesn't mean that Truckee Meadows provides service.
It was indicated that Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District did have the closest station. In terms of actual fire service, that would be again looked at during the actual master plan amendment process, which does have to happen again and does have to go back through the Regional Planning Agency and to the Regional Planning Commission. So those items, including water and other items, would be looked at with that actual development.
So many of the findings that we're being asked to make here to authorize this change in this amendment to the TMSA are all things that have to be figured out in the future. And if it's not figured out right here today, I can't make the findings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie. Before I go to Commissioner Hartung, I believe Ms. Robinson, did you have a, okay, you're good. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Lauren, the two parcels that are being called out as islands, they're undevelopable, are they not? They're 2,000 square feet. I mean, that's not a lot.
The small one, I believe it's 1,000 square feet. Most of it is in the DCA area,
Right.
so it's pretty blocked up.
Right, right. I'm not sure whether the public realizes that just to the north of this property at 14,800, 395 south is 58.863 acres zoned multi-use, which is apartment buildings. So you've got apartment buildings right down the street, and I will draw the public's attention to the time when we turned down an application just down the street to the south for a very intense use from a landscaping firm. That was a huge change in your valley. With all due respect to the city of Reno and a joint plan, you've never given us the opportunity to joint plan Verdi, Lemon Valley, Cold Springs, instead, Stonegate, huge areas to joint plan. If we want to talk about joint planning, let's talk about joint planning. This is just a request to move from one entity to another in the TMSA. This is not a project. And what I would tell you is that when we get to the point, I would require, no different than we required Reno Land with West Reno Water to bring in Tumwa water. I would not allow a small cap facility to serve this. No different than I would allow, or I would, if I had the decision to make, which I don't, Great Basin Water Company to serve Stonegate, which it could not. So I think we're talking about things that are completely outside of our lane. What we're asked here today is, should we remove this from the sphere of influence? The city of Reno has had years. Lauren, how long has it been in the SOI?
Since, I believe, at least 2002.
2002. So we've had 16 years to make this change. And I'm not for an intense development, but I would tell you that if it were annexed into the city of Reno, you talk about land density transfers. The city of Reno just has higher density uses. They can put multifamily on this. You can have an apartment complex on this, just like you have on the 58.863 acres directly to the north. And just like you have over on Geiger Grade. You have an apartment complex that was approved there. So, you know, I would respectfully make a motion at any time to move forward with this, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lawson. Please.
This is more difficult than it sounds. I mean, here Sparks sits in the middle of this whole thing because we don't have a dog in this fight. But we will have a dog in this fight somewhere down the road. So my purpose in this is to get it right, and get it right the first time. And there's too many unanswered questions for me. So I'd like to see us get some more further down the road. Some of these future decisions that we don't get to participate in at the regional planning, I think should come back to us so we can. Like fire. Fire's a big deal. I don't like the idea And I, you know, I'm going to give the applicant the benefit of the doubt that they didn't jurisdiction shop. But there doesn't say that we create the precedence for the next guy to jurisdiction shop, so that they cherry pick the best jurisdiction for their particular development. I think the number of housing units makes a big deal for this. I think annexation to Reno. Is there a real appetite from Reno to annex it? And Mr. McKenzie brought up private versus Tumwa on the water. So if the wells go dry in Steamboat Valley, where does the water come from? It's going to come from Tumwa. And then the rest of the ratepayers at Tumwa are going to pay for it. So it's a big deal. It doesn't affect Spark, but it does affect us long-term down the road. And right now, I'd like to see this continued, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to see more information come back so that we can make a legitimate decision on whether this should be transferred over.
Okay, I'm going to hear from Councilman Dorr and then Commissioner Burke-Bickler.
Okay. Well, first of all, I guess since there's a motion on the floor, I would be willing to second the motion.
To be clear, there's no motion on the floor.
Oh, I thought
There
you
was a
just-
suggestion of a motion. And
I got
We've
you.
heard some indications.
Okay, then I'll just make my comments. You know, first I want to compliment the staff. This is an unusual case, and I'm sure you put a lot of time in. I've read all your materials. What came through to me, and point after point, was that there was no change. You know, there's no change to the natural resources. There's no change to the timing and phasing of the infrastructure. There's no change, there's no change. And in order to make a change, to change the sphere of influence or to change something, I'm looking for something that would compel me to make a change. And all I hear is a change of a line and jurisdiction and who reviews the application. So what I was looking for, although you gave lots of points because they're already in the TMSA, I think it's a little bit misleading, or not intentionally, but it seems to have these high points, and yet there is no change of anything. Where it is, the form and pattern and you know, resources, the infrastructure. So what I'm looking for is what would compel me to change a jurisdiction. It isn't a jurisdiction. We haven't had an opportunity to comment on it. When we've commented in the NAB, it did come to my NAB. Lots of people came to my NAB. There was lots of discussion about a previous proposal. When I reviewed it, there was annexation, there was a master plan change. It was so a package, which I do acknowledge and I think is value to helping us make a decision. But at the same time, that package, that as a whole, was not something I personally could get behind right at that moment. I mean, it had a great intensification of density and change in form and function from what it is today. And in other places here, you say that who is servicing this area right now? Well, it's not being serviced. It's not built out. You know, there are no buildings to save from fire. There is no fire response here, or police response here, or anything. So I thought that was, you know, that was a little bit confusing the way that was written in there. So that would be what I would be looking for. I would wonder, why is this being requested? If there's no change in anything, there's no improvement in a process. We have a good process at Reno. We've reviewed hundreds since I've been on the council of developments. We wade through the process, you know, look at it in close detail. So that's what I'm looking for, Mr. Chairman, is what would compel us to make a change. I understand applicants' request, and I really want to understand why they're requesting it. You know, there must be something, an improvement, a change of process, something to compel the change. So that's kind of where I am.
Okay, I want to make sure that we're hearing from all the members. Commissioner Burke-Bickler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important to point out exactly, as Mr. Councilman Lawson indicated, that there were points that he thought needed to be further discussed. I'd like to know what those are. So if we could, at some point, get some clear guidance from staff on what the other points are that need to be followed here. I don't think fire is a good example, largely because, in fact, there is police and fire in that area. This is a wildland, and so there's all kinds of fire protection there from Truckee Meadows Fire as far as wildland goes. There's also lots of other houses in that area, so there's protection from Truckee Meadows for the houses that are in the county, as well as I understand it now, that there is a automatic aid agreement between Washoe and Reno. We've just had that confirmed. So there's an automatic aid agreement between Washoe and Reno to provide services in that area. And so, in fact, there is fire service and there's police service. Both the city of Reno have police in that area, and Washoe County Sheriff's deputies are in that area on a routine basis. So I'm not sure that that's pertinent to this issue. I also don't think it's pertinent to this committee. Those are both issues that are managed by the city of Reno and by Washoe County, and they are not under the purview necessarily of the regional governing board. So I have some concerns about trying to expand the regional governing board on that. I also think, and I just say this just for the record, I think it's time to stop this competition. This is not Reno against Washoe County, or Sparks is on the outside right now, but you know they might be on the inside next time around. This isn't competition. This is growth, land use, regional in the regional district, and I think it's time for us to stop throwing things at each other. And I would like to see us try to work together as a team in a much better fashion on all of these properties, and there are a lot of them out there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burkhardt. I know that Mr. Hartung would like a second, but I do, before we go to Mr. Hartung, see if anyone else would like to ask questions from the board.
I'd like a second also, but I am...
For first time, just hang on. I'm asking
Yeah.
more to folks who have not had a first at this point. Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to Ms. Bybee.
This is a tough issue, and sitting as Sparks outside of the middle of this, I agree with Councilman Lawson. You know, we do have a dog in the fight because we are part of the regional process, and making regional planning decisions is part of our responsibility, whether it's in our jurisdiction or not. I think I would like to hear, if we can, I would agree in a way with basically moving the line from TMSA, whether it's with Reno or the county, with everything else remaining the same. And the biggest thing for, I think, everyone to really, for myself, and I think for all of us, is to stop and realize that we are just talking about the jurisdiction today. We're not talking about whatever the plan is going to be. And we can't really, I can't say whether I'm a resident or whether I'm a developer. Well, the developer might be able to answer that question down the line, but today there is no project. I don't know what's going to be on the property. I can't, my decision today can't be based on what I think will be coming and who I think, whether Reno is going to respond in one way and the county responds in another, is kind of, you can't say. I mean, you don't know till you go before those bodies with whatever plan it is, what the outcome is going to be. And then you work, you know, together. You work with, like our developers come to us and they work with the city and with the planning agencies to hammer out something that works to everyone's best interest. So without a plan today, and I think it's easy to kind of get stuck moving down the road and looking at that instead of looking today, you know, what is the reason to move this? So why is the applicant applying for the move? I don't know if that's possible to have that addressed a little bit, to make it a little clearer to us on what the motivation is and reasons, to kind of make it make sense to us, because it is simply, you know, moving the line, and I know there's implications in doing that, but if I could get that clarity, if possible.
We will do that. I'm going to kind of juggle things just a little bit, see that applicant's representative is here. We have to clarify the record, though, on the fire piece, and I believe, Ms. Hanson, you have some information that you'd like to share to fine-tune the points that we've made.
Thank you. If I could get the overhead, please. I worked with Chief Cochran earlier today on this, just so we had a clear understanding. Can you zoom in on that? I don't know. If I do that or you do that. So this area, Claudia Hansen, Planning Manager for City of Reno, for the record, this area is not covered under automatic aid. It is under mutual aid, as all the area is, but it is located outside of the boundary of automatic aid. The existing agreement would have to be amended to include that area. I can show you one here. This is the closest area, up a little bit further north. Up in this area would be the closest one, up on Western Skies. Station 12 in the city and Station 14 is located over there. And then Station 16 is located to the south for Truckee, is the one moving. Truckee Meadows, correct. 14 there, that one's moving north. Right, 16 is also Truckee Meadows, that's located to the south, it's off of this map. But this is the automatic aid area. And then just showing current jurisdictional boundaries right now. On fire jurisdiction, the orange color is City of Reno, and then the lavender would be Truckee Meadows. And the site is roughly in that area, so it's Truckee Meadows right now. But I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, that this area is not covered under automatic.
Thank you very much for that
Sure.
clarification. On this point, do we have any questions, Ms. Hanson, or we can let her sit? And I believe we had questions posed to.
I'll just say thank you.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
clarifying that on the
Sure.
record.
I
Thank you.
think Ms. Bybee had some questions that she wanted to pose to applicant's representative. Is that correct? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sev Carlson with Kempfer Kroll on behalf of the applicant. Excuse me. To Councilwoman Bybee's question of why is the request here today? With all due respect to the council members from the city of Reno, part of my job is to lobby. We did not have the votes for annexation with the majority of the city council members from the city of Reno. We're not going to go through that process if we're not going to have the votes. It's a judgment call when you're lobbying on a project. If we're not going to get the votes, I'm not going to spend the time or my client's money going through that process. If we can't annex it, how else can we develop it? Detachment. That's why we're here today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'm going to go back to Commissioner Hartung and then Commissioner Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think it is stated fairly succinctly in under background in the second paragraph, and I will read, it says, there would be no appetite to annex the property due to the city's budget constraints and potential lack of ability to serve the site. So that's a fairly obvious statement. To Mr. Lawson's statement about costing Tumwa ratepayers, in the case of the West Reno Water Company, they're actually building all of the infrastructure, and Tumwa would require them to build that infrastructure and then dedicate it over to Tumwa. It would not be on the back of Tumwa ratepayers. I can wholeheartedly promise you that we would not push infrastructure out that was not paid for by the developer. So, and Tumwa is in a very stable position, and in fact, it would truly benefit this, regardless of who is doing the planning in this area, to have Tumwa there, because then you would have conjunctive use. You would have a mixture of surface and groundwater. And one of the things that we've done where the Galena fan was being overused, we've started to recharge the Galena fan now with surface water to stabilize it, and we've done that in quite a number of places. Speaking from Tumwa's position, I'm not speaking for Tumwa, I'm just telling you what we've done. So that conjunctive use is a very it's a very essential part of stabilizing our water supplies in the area, our groundwater versus our surface water supplies. We're not here to talk about fire protection today. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a change from the TMSA. And by the way, a piece of this is zoned general commercial, and it could have a large rock operation on it. And that's what we're trying to avoid right now, is not having to deal with those kinds of heavy commercial uses. So bear that in mind. This is not the wolf coming out of the forest to gobble you up. I would tell you that there will be a lot of public process. It will have to come back to this body. This is by no means a done deal. This is the first step in the process, and we're not allowed to do highly intense uses as if it were in the city. Again, I would call your attention to the parcel that's just to the north, that almost 59 acres of multi-use that will be a heavy, intense use, likely apartment buildings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Dorr, and then we'll go back to Commissioner Breckus on the phone.
Not sure if this is, okay, there we go. First, I want to thank Mr. Carlson for his honesty. I think he put it right on the record that he didn't feel that he had the votes for annexation. This area would have been annexed into my ward. I was not supporting it at the time because there was a project attached to it that would come right after the annexation. And my understanding of what that project was. Recently this week, I was a different project was discussed with me that was different from that project, quite different. And so I don't know why others might not have been supporting annexation, but I could speculate that that had something to do with it. So I think that, I guess at the same time that I want to compliment him, I want to challenge he and his clients in that to think about a different kind of project that might work in that area and might be able to get some more support, to your point of lobbying. And where I'm at is that the current planning process incorporates a cooperative planning process here today. And while that's not a finding that we make here, it's still an outcome. If we change this here today, what that means is that the cooperative planning goes away. The cooperative planning, at least, is near the joint planning that our city council voted for unanimously. It's a lot closer to the vision. We wanted, to your point, Ms. Brickbigler, we wanted to work with the county on an appropriate kind of development for this area together. And that's why we went with joint planning, and that's why I'm sticking to at least cooperative planning. And that's sort of influencing my thoughts on this process. So it's both pieces. It's what had been proposed, discussed in the public, discussed at the NAB, discussed in a special meeting that with 170 residents that I was at. I can't unring that bell and say, no, it's something different. I mean, that was very much on the record. And so I just want to be clear about what was influencing my decisions on the annexation at that time. A different proposal, a different idea might change that outcome. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Breckus on the phone.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone's comments in the discussion. I'm prepared to make a motion. That would be a motion of denial.
We're going to hold on the motion at this point. We do have some more public comment that's been submitted.
Oh, I
If you have
beg
any
your
more,
pardon.
yeah, I mean, feel free to add more to the deliberation, or if you have any questions.
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, we generally take public comment at either the start or the end of an item, but recognizing that we have a lot of public interest in this one this evening, we did receive one other card, and that is from Mary Ann Olsner. Is she still with us this evening? Please come forward and share your comment.
My name is Mary Ann Olsner. I live on Feldspar Court in the Steamboat area. And I just want to emphasize that this is a potentially wet area. It's marshy and it's wet. And when we have the big rains that we have periodically, this Steamboat Creek is a raging river. And this river is then dangerous, and it's too dangerous for people to cross onto the highway from Town Drive. It's actually the Steamboat residents that are there are completely cut off. And if you're out, you're out, and if you're in, you're in. So that is a real major concern. And then about the water from the Steamboat Springs. We are periodically affected by this water being very restricted. In fact, we observe restrictions year-round. And the other thing is, I want to point out that we need open space available. The park that's over on Steamboat Parkway is already overrun. there's no parking. They expanded the parking slightly, but there is no parking for people. And they're building apartments, thousands of them, right across the street from that park. So, you know, we need more space for people to ride their bikes and enjoy the outdoors. And this is an area that is so unsuitable for building. We really need open space, and it's becoming less and less in our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further public comment? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to bring it back to the board with a few comments of my own prior to seeing where this goes. Looking ahead towards my pledge, which remains that we are going to pursue a consensus update to the regional plan. It's very apparent that situations like these are outliers that are challenging from a policy perspective. And so my hope is, regardless of what happens this afternoon, we can all kind of clear the decks following and engage proactively in a discussion about how to make these sorts of processes cleaner, provide more certainty to everyone, neighbors, property owners alike. But that said, I really appreciate the comments that came initially from Councilman Lawson about the fact that, you know, let's just call it as we're seeing it. I mean, this is a situation where the Sparks contingent, as they come to this body as the Regional Planning Governing Board, are in a pretty unique situation. We are all sitting here as commissioners of the Regional Planning Governing Board. We're not here, you know, the Reno background, the Washoe background, the Sparks background, that's background. So with that, and we'll see where this goes. Commissioner Lawson, do you have a motion that you would like to make?
Can we make another comment, Mr. Chairman?
Let's go ahead and see if we can get a motion from Commissioner Lawson, and then we'll have full discussion on.
Well, I made a motion earlier.
I heard a motion that was suggested, but I would like to take a motion from Commissioner Lawson.
All right, well, as much as I want more information, much as I understand the process, this is an odd duck in my mind. So this particular piece and where it is in the nature of that area. But you got to make a decision, not an easy decision for me. So in my opinion, that this property should be under the Washoe County's TMS, under their planning, and take it out of the Reno city sphere. That's what we're here to decide, and that's what I think we should move it over to county and out of Reno's sphere.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have discussion on the motion?
I'd like to discuss, if you might.
Councilman Breckus.
Yeah. I think that if we were in 2002 and the deal had been packaged in Judge Hardisty's chambers and come to the Reno City Council at that point, and then the governing board, I would probably not have been in the thinking that this should go into Reno's TMSA. I think at that point it would have been an opportunity to create and shore up some pretty firm boundaries. But at this point, I think that this action today, when Reno's already moved down into this area across the road that way there, is, you know, changing horses midstream. And changing horses midstream can put you up against a tougher current. And that's where I think this is flawed. And it's really based upon an analysis of the lay of the landscape down there. And so I think a pullout at this time would go in a direction that's not suitable. And I have some findings of denial if this motion fails that more or less illustrate that in some of the considerations before us, which are the logical extension of the municipal boundaries, the infrastructure, and then also the natural resources management. So I won't be supporting the motion, and I just explained why. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And what I would say is, one, we're not at a project, but what I will guarantee the public is that you will get something that you will like. And I'm already working with this planner at a completely different site and they've agreed and talked the applicant into doing some huge off-site upgrades to flood and fire, adding things completely off-site that have nothing to do with the project that they're working on as a community effort. And I think that we can have a similar scenario here, and I give you my word that it will not be something that does not fit into your area. I've lived in the same house 31 years in Spanish Springs, and I understand completely about form and function. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Councilwoman Bybee.
This is a tough one. This is not an easy decision for any of us to make. The thing that's most important to me, whichever jurisdiction this property is in, is that that plan that is in place with the transition from rural to higher densities is maintained. That it is not, the land that's not developable allows someone to squeeze higher density into the field. And in all this report that we have, it talks about the zoning uses and the density for the city versus the county, even if they're called different things, is showing the same. And we showed this is the same as that is the same, and until somebody comes back with the development agreement on what they're going to develop. So my biggest concern is, whether it's the city of Reno or it's Washoe County, that you respect that you respect the rural nature and the transition that we're looking for those residents. But for any of us, whether we live out there or not, doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't have a house or a ranch out there to have very high density right next to that rural property. There needs to be transition. It needs to flow northward to the logical commercial and higher density because we do need the housing, but I think we still have to preserve what this region is about, the outdoors, the beauty of why we all live here, and still have that with housing that we need, with developers who will honor that in their design and in their density, to make it a good situation for everyone. So that's my top priority that I want to see, regardless of which jurisdiction it winds up in, because like I said before, there's no guarantee with either one, that the residents or the developer are going to get what they want, because that's the next step in the process. But I would urge that to be the case with development, which is going to come, to be considered strongly as you make those decisions, regardless of which TMSA it falls in. Thank you.
And apologies to the audience as you're hearing me say commissioner and then councilperson and commissioner. As we're here, we're all commissioners on the Regional Planning and Governing Board, but I'm so used to addressing all of you as Councilwoman Doerr, Commissioner Doerr.
Just on the motion, I think that if we were, with all due respect, if we were to approve this motion, that for me, it would set a bad precedent. It would say that if, say, Washoe County had not, a developer had gone to Washoe County and they weren't favorable, that developer could come to Reno and maybe get a different answer. That concerns me. I would want to support you. I would want to support Sparks the same way. I would say to the developer to work with that jurisdiction to try to get an acceptable development. So I can't support the motion. It does away with the cooperative planning. That's an outcome of it. I don't think that's a good result, and so that's where I am.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Perpigler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I totally agree with Councilwoman Commissioner Bybee on the issue of retaining some of the sense of rural beauty of this community. That's the hardest part about growth. That is the for me, that's the hardest part about growth. I grew up here. I moved here in 1959, so I'm almost a native. And I just, the thought of not doing transitional housing as we move closer to the city really concerns me. And so I completely agree that whichever jurisdiction handles this, ultimately, this project, needs to really take a serious look at what exactly the project will be down the road. And so I'm very supportive of that concept, but I will be supporting this motion.
Okay, Commissioner McKenzie.
Dim lights. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've heard a number of people talk about wanting to assure that there's a transition between the existing neighborhood and any development that may go in there. And the only way that this board can assure that is by there being continuing cooperative planning, and to take it off from under the sphere of the city of Reno takes that cooperative planning away, because without the cooperative planning, transfer of density is allowed, and that transfer of density, while we've got commissioners here assuring that they won't do it, that doesn't mean that it won't happen. But the only way we can assure that that doesn't happen is for it to stay within the sphere of the city of Reno. But I still can't make the findings. The problem is that not being able to make the findings makes me question what this is even doing in the TMSA. And so if I was to make a motion on this, my motion would be to remove it completely from the TMSA, because it doesn't fit the pattern of the TMSA. I don't have a problem with the county being overseeing the development, but this board loses complete control, and our plan has no effect on that development once the cooperative planning's gone, because there can be cluster development, which means that transition zoning, they can transfer houses into that transition growth zoning in order to meet their housing needs of their overall zoning plan. So that is what the neighborhood fears. That's why the neighborhood has come and said, oh, if it's out up under the sphere, then all of a sudden they can transfer density. Now they can transfer density into that transition zoning, and that's their fear, and that's what we give up control of, even though we've got a number of board members up here, commissioners have said that that's what they want to assure comes out of this. Well, we're given the one guarantee that neighborhood has, that there's going to be transitional zoning there. We're giving that up by taking it off from under the sphere of the city of Reno.
Okay, if you could hold your applause, please. Seeing no further discussion on the motion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
Mr. Azevedo?
You need a roll call.
Let's do that. Ayes, please raise your hand. And noes.
I'm raising my hand.
I could see you. I was pretty sure you were. Okay. With that, we're going to go to Councilwoman Breckus. I believe you had earlier hinted at a previous motion.
Yeah, and I have drafted while we've been sitting here talking and thinking and hearing this some findings.
Point of clarification. Because the action failed,
There's no need.
there's no need for further action.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The matter before you is based on a recommendation from the RPC. Unless this body approves it, it does fail. The rules do contemplate under 278.0276 that if there's an amended change to it, it goes back to the RPC and then comes back. So
correct.
It hasn't moved. It doesn't preclude you from entertaining a second motion.
Right. Councilwoman Breckus, is that clear to you at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what would be advisable or where's the appetite. I can maybe just summarize, or I can, I can just stand everything down, and we know that, it's not. We've gone into a different direction, so I'll just ask you what you think, or
Okay.
maybe.
No, I think
Mr.
we're.
Robinson.
I think we're good at this point. Thanks for sticking with us on that. Okay, so with that, we're continuing on with item 7, business of the day. Moving now to item 7C, informational presentation, discussion, and possible direction to staff regarding fiscal year 2018-19 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is on. So the item before you today is to really get a sense of the assumptions that the governing board would like to see staff to utilize to put together a draft budget and go to the managers regarding the jurisdictional allocations. And we'll run through this pretty quickly. I'm mindful of your time and know that we've gone a little bit longer, so we'll move along. Okay, so part of the conversation I wanted to raise today is kind of to share the budget revenues. Everyone's budget revenues obviously have fallen. The reason I picked 2005 is because that was the last time we were doing a substantive regional plan update. So that was the last time there was a lot of dollars and effort and staff put into a comprehensive update similar to what it is that we are attempting to do at this point in time. So as you can see, we broke these also out by jurisdictional allocation to get to these dollar amounts. At the time, which I think was the highest allocation in the history, Reno was providing $509,000 a year. Sparks and Washoe County were both providing $382,000 a year. Since that time, we did receive a budget increase in fiscal year 2016-17. That was a 5% increase at that point in time, and that raised our figures up to just $287,000, $215,000. As you can see on the next slide, we had a steady state budget for, forgive me, just to clarify, what you see in front of you is the increase for 16-17 in comparison to what our budget was in revenues in terms of 05-06, and the allocation difference was 16-17. So as you can see, there's a pretty significant difference between the amount of resources we had to do the last regional plan, comprehensive regional plan update, was really large, and this one. You'll see on your next slide that this shows that we kept steady state allocations from 16-17 into this year. Moving on, you'll see that you also approved an allocation for the regional plan update for last year from the jurisdictions of $115,800. You also indicated that TMRPA should use $34,200 from their fund balance, bringing us to a total of $150,000 for the regional plan update. At that time, you also indicated that if it appeared that we would need some implementation dollars, since we were at the very beginning of the process at that point in time, we should come back and talk to you about that this year. And so we are going to do that right now. Okay, in terms of the regional plan update, we've gotten quite a bit further in terms of that conversation. Our consultants have come in twice now, and we have our staff working group, which has members from all 3 jurisdictions and the Regional Transportation Commission joining us. And one of the pieces of feedback we heard last week when Mike McKeever, one of the consultants, was in town, is that there's a need for an increased timeline regarding. Ms. Breckus, are you still there?
That's what I thought too. I was starting to count heads thinking we didn't have a quorum.
David's coming right back.
Yeah, we're informational at this point.
David's going to be back.
He'll be back in a second. Here he is.
Thank you. That just occurred to me. Apologies for the non sequitur, but it appears you thought the same thing as well, so we're all on the same page. So the staff working group indicated that perhaps we were aggressive in our timeline, and I would tend to agree with that particular assessment. So in those conversations, we talked about what that would mean in terms of needing more time. And part of what we discussed was, okay, we fleshed out quite a bit more what our approach is going to be. We're doing a non-jurisdictional map to show where the possibilities for growth might be. And we should probably talk about dollar amounts and the process to include implementation needs. We've also heard a desire for information on a fiscal analysis on land development patterns. We've heard that the jurisdictions also are interested in receiving that information as part of the input into the regional plan update. So moving on, we have presented this extended timeline. It's obviously relatively small, but you do also have it in front of you. What you're really looking at here is we were talking about adoption of the regional plan update in that kind of November, December timeframe. We're now talking about February and March. And we are anticipating that the additional implementation phase would take us out through June of 2019. So it is a shift of a couple of months. You can see that we've laid out the work regarding the tasks that were in the second phase of the scope of work listed above. And we think that this is a very reasonable time frame. It's aggressive, but we think that we can manage this as long as we have the resources necessary to do it. Okay, so really quickly, let's just chat about our 18-19 work plan. As you know, we're going to do the consensus forecast for 2018. As I alluded to previously, there's a potential collaboration with the Governor's Office of Economic Development. They're interested in working with us on forecasting for the 5-county region and utilizing our spatial modeling efforts. We believe that would also support the regional plan update, since part of the conversation has been we need to discuss the regional plan in the context of the larger community, and that includes that 5-county region. Obviously, we'll continue to provide data and information to all of our partners. And we've also been asked to do some work with source water protection. You saw that in December and approved that. We believe that the update of industrial land supply and absorption is something that will come out of the update. We need to continue processing regional plan amendments, conformance reviews. It's not going to surprise you when I say that traffic has increased. We have more in the pipeline, let's put it that way. Okay, so moving forward to our next slide. I want to give you a sense of what potential additional expenses we're talking about. And obviously you have this listed in your staff report as well. We definitely at this point in time need some additional software purchases. There's changes in licensing as well. That's kind of, those modifications may impact our bottom line. We need some additional funds. We have some accounting and audit reports, a new GASB rule. We need a new other post-employment benefits report, which lasts for 3 years. That would be a one-time conversation. And we believe at this point in time, we need to purchase additional data to effectively be able to support and analyze our current efforts. Okay, one other item we'd like to raise is that our lease expires in April 2019. If we renew, there could be a monthly increase, potential increase, which is reasonable. If not, we need to think of the following. So we have to think about the cost of moving to a new location. In 2012, when we did it, it cost us $30,000. Additionally, at this point in time, as part of our shared work program, we get both telephone system and support and computer support from RTC. We're very thankful for that. That would look like an additional $25,000 to $35,000 on our budget on an ongoing basis. I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised to hear me say that my suggested recommendation here is that we have a conversation with RTC and Lee Gibson, which I certainly will do, but I wanted to share these potential assumptions with you. Okay. Additionally, when it comes to staffing needs moving forward, currently we have a full-time contractual position supporting us in the regional plan update and also doing increased development activity work. It's time to move that contractual employee to a full-time position, that particular position. If we are continuing to move forward with affordable housing staff support, at the moment we've been very lucky to raise dollars from Community Services Agency to cover that particular expense. I believe this is appropriately moved to a one-time contractual position, and we reevaluate after that year what that may potentially look like. So a one-year full-time position. I have heard that there may be support within the financial community to potentially help to support that position. Finally, we do need an increase in our administrative support. We've currently been living with half-time administrative support, and we've got a lot to do. It's time to move to full-time. Okay. In terms of some of the other assumptions we're talking about, again, in your staff report, I mentioned the GASB piece, potential increase in healthcare costs. We have found that we really enjoy MetroQuest, the survey tool. We were lucky enough to raise $21,000 this year as a grant to be able to purchase that. Not only are we using it, Truckee Meadows, we've partnered with Truckee Meadows tomorrow to use it. Washoe County's using it with us. I believe our next surveys are going to be housing, and we've been chatting with RTC about maybe being able to do a survey with them as well. We think that we should actually go ahead and invest in that next year, and again, make it available to all of our partners. We would continue our use of interns because we believe it's a good, strong program. We've got a lot of good data management work that can be done, and that's an appropriate staffing solution. So my recommendation is that you discuss what I've just laid out, provide some feedback around those assumptions, and let me know what you think about these things. I'm certainly willing to go away and draft a budget and also talk to the managers, as I indicated in the staff report regarding these items. I did want to come to you first and see what your thoughts were around it. So that's my recommendation. That's my presentation. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you, and I'm sure we'll have some questions, but before we get to those, if we could go back to the slide that had the regional plan update, because I think it's very important for all of this budget discussion, of course. And I apologize because I had to step out for a moment. I think you just had it. It was the kind of the Gantt chart style That piece. Okay, so could you reiterate
Absolutely.
those highlights?
Absolutely.
Milestones?
So we are working with our staff working group and our consultants. We're moving forward. One of the primary pieces we're working on right now is a non-jurisdictional map so that we can take a look at regional form and pattern and where it's appropriate for new growth to potentially occur. We will be layering on top of that infrastructure capacity, various other criteria pieces. What you're really seeing in front of you is that our expectation previously had been adoption between the Planning Commission and the Governing Board of the Regional Plan Update in the November-December 2018 timeframe. I'm suggesting that this shift now is February and March of 2019, which is a couple of months. We believe that we will continue to work on implementation through the end of that fiscal year, which is 2019, June 30th, 2019, excuse me. And those were the highlights.
Okay, thank you so much. Questions from the board?
Just one quick one.
Councilman Burke.
And you probably, maybe you showed this, but I supported virtually everything that you talked about, the additional administrative staff. You mentioned a staff person, the housing, so on and so forth. But what I don't understand right now is supporting this. What does that mean, money-wise, in terms of how, if you did everything that you just laid out, how would it change your budget?
Well, and I think that's a great question. So this is one of the struggles that I have every year when I sit down to write a budget, because when we think about things like potential increase in healthcare costs or potential staff increases or the potential increase in staff, I mean, just 3 positions alone, I could come up with probably 350 different kind of options around it. So part of what I'm trying to do today is narrow down some of those options so that we can get you a much better number at the April meeting. The conversation in April would allow you to be able to take a look at those dollar amounts. You would not be required, if you didn't want to adopt it in April. You could wait until June so we could have an additional conversation. So I've tried to build in a couple months.
So wait a second. I apologize for interrupting. So you can wait till June? I mean, you can. I thought you had to do your budget option in May. Not so?
What we need is to be able to provide the jurisdictional allocation numbers. We need those agreed upon with the jurisdictions. That does not mean that our final budget has to be done in May. It can be done in June. So April has to be jurisdictional allocation. If you're asking me right now what I think the potential, what this potentially could look like.
Yeah. A 10%, 20% increase in our allocations or something, or what do you think? I mean, we already give you very little money. This is my perspective, and maybe not shared by everyone, but I believe we give you very little money. So to do the jobs, I mean, just talk about the affordable housing conversation we had earlier today. I mean, this is a big job to do. We have struggled individually as each jurisdiction to handle that job. Now we're saying, hey, take on this big job. And so I think it's not correct to give you big new jobs, to recognize what's going on in inflation and so on, and then just say, you get exactly what we gave you last time. Like, I don't think that works. That's just not logical. So, I'm willing at the City of Reno to talk about increasing our allocation over here. I just wondered what you might think it might look like. Did you have a sense of it?
Sure.
I don't want you to be afraid to say this, numbers.
You do or you don't?
I do not want you to. I mean, I'm into reality testing, that's all.
Okay. I would say with everything, including the potential implementation, the, kind of adjustment in terms of the hours, if those staff positions were increased without some of the other costs. So let's take off the idea of having to cover a move or, telephone support, things like that. I think we're probably talking about $250,000.
200 what, total?
$200,000 to $250,000.
Total. Yeah, and then that would be divided into 3 ways, and then.
Divided 40.
So, 200 on
rough.
top of 700. I mean, so 30% increase or 25% increase, something like that. Okay. So that's what I'm just trying to get a ballpark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Commissioner Bybee.
I guess my question would be, do we have any possible grant on our income side, grants or shared work programs that have been beneficial to our bottom line to kind of help us offset some of these additional costs? Do you foresee some of that coming into this budget year?
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. This past year, we've been very fortunate. We've actually raised $61,500 in various revenues to support specific projects. So say, for instance, the money for stormwater supported supported itself. We are looking at source water protection. What we're starting to find, and I'm going to use Jeremy as an obvious example, there's only so much Jeremy to go around to manage some of these projects. So at some point in time, even if stormwater pays for the intern itself, there's no more Jeremy to kind of be able to manage that piece. So that's part of what.
That's right.
And I certainly wish that that was a possibility. Let's explore that a little bit more. In terms of additional grant dollars, here's what I found about that. I'm decent at raising additional funds throughout the year in terms of various projects. It's incredibly hard to predict, and I have to be honest and say, I think this might have been our banner year. We might have hit the big one this year, and it might be less next year, and we just have to be cognizant of that. I do want to point out, RTC, we are still in a shared work program with them. We are scheduled to receive an additional $60,000 from them as our shared work program next year. We've had conversation based on a conversation we actually had with Enterprise around affordable housing, taking a look at potential siting locations near transit, for housing, affordable housing. I've asked for RTC if they've indicated they're willing to take a look at their budget and see if perhaps for a one-time allocation going back to the $100,000 allocation they provided us, because that has dropped by 40% since we started 5 years ago, and that's because they also have money concerns as well. So I would like to say yes, I think we can raise the money, but I have to say I can't. I can't guarantee that.
Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Kim, how does this usually happen? Does the governing board just send a bill, or do you make a request to the agencies for a percentage increase so that you say, okay, well, we need to increase our budget by a certain amount, and therefore your allocations are going up by a certain amount, and what if one or two of the agencies says, no, we don't have that money in our budget, right, because we have to give money back to the state, right, because sales tax was miscalculated.
Mm-hmm. So this is always...
This is just hypothetical, Mr. Chairman.
Hypothetical, not that would ever happen.
This is just hypothetical, sir.
Member Hartung, that's a great question, and it's always a bit of a delicate dance. Generally, what happens is there is a conversation with the jurisdictional managers happens in addition to a conversation with the governing board. The final decision around the amount that comes to the regional planning agency is the governing board's under the governing board's control. You get to make that decision, but I know that there is the need to be mindful of the budgets at the jurisdictions from which you come. And that was another reason I thought it was appropriate to bring this conversation forward in February this year, to say, okay, here's some of the things we're thinking about, here's some of the options. I'm trying to get a sense of what the governing board thinks, and also we would be reaching out to the jurisdictions and saying, so what does this look like for you? Okay. You have the final choice, but there's generally a conversation as well between yourself and your jurisdiction.
Right, and the very difficult part, and I think the members left from City of Reno, City of Sparks, and I won't speak directly for Washoe County, but I will just tell you our budget is flat. Mm. In fact, we're dipping in, to our savings, so to speak, because we've had some unforeseen expenditures that
all of us.
Yeah, agreed. I wasn't trying to single us out of the herd and say, hey, we're the only ones.
No, same reason though.
Yeah, yes, understood.
We got turf.
So I understand the need, and I also liked the idea of, and I know that you can't clone Jeremy, but I think that there might be some innovative ways. Our data is very valuable, mm-hmm. and currently, I think we just give it away for the most part. And perhaps there needs to be a discussion about the value of that data. Here's the very difficult part. Most people believe that the internet should be free, and I should just be able to get any piece of information that I want. But unfortunately, even like Wikipedia, my family happens to support Wikipedia periodically because we love it as a resource.
That is solid.
That is solid.
It is. I kid you not. I kid you not. That's the little plug.
It's
for
Vaughnipedia. Right on. That's cool.
But I guess my point is that our ability to collect data and to disseminate that data is amazing, and maybe we need to just revisit how we deal with that. I don't know.
Member Hartung, if I may, I think what I'm hearing a suggestion on, and I've certainly had conversations previously around this, there's always the conversation around a government agency, information that's gathered, analyzed, the additional value that's put on. Previously, I've known that there's been some government regulations around what some of that looks like, but I think what I'm hearing you describe is it's worth investigation and discussion.
What I'm implying, Madam Director, is that there is a value to that data, and I'm not looking to be profitable, I'm looking to cover my costs. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable position to take.
Okay.
Just cost recovery, that's it, plain, pure, and simple to, to certain outside agencies that, and especially even the private sector. Many people in the private sector look at our data and make decisions, make solid business decisions based on our data.
Okay.
Whether it's business or housing.
Thank you
Mr.
for the
Chairman.
feedback.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further questions on this item? Well, what is your
Was that
motion
the
there?
budget?
Wait a minute. What are you motioning?
Mr. Chair, if I may just really quickly.
Yes.
Obviously, the other half of this conversation is, I understand that potentially revenues are flat around the jurisdictions, and that's one of the reasons I tried to lay out the things that we are doing, because then the other conversation becomes, what do we potentially not do?
Right.
And I think you all know that because you've been in these conversations at your jurisdictions as well, but given the large audience, I thought it was appropriate to bring it up.
Yep. Yep.
And I think without us saying that we agree with her looking into putting another staff member on, that Kim doesn't have the ability to go talk to the other jurisdictions about whether that funding would be available. So that's why I think that it's important that we move forward in that direction and give her approval to go forward. So I would move.
Sounds like a motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, moving now to reports. 8A, members and directors reports. Madam Director, do you have anything for us?
I have nothing, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, all talked out. Anything from the members? Seeing none, we're going to go now to legal counsel report. Do we have anything from legal counsel?
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, sir. We did have our WCSD Board of Trustees member here. Let the record show, she did join us for a lot of this, but had to leave early, so we don't have a report from her. Requests for future agenda items. Seeing none, public comment. I have one card for Kathy Brandhorst. No? Okay. Okay, thank you. Written correspondence, number 11.
There's none.
There's none. And Commissioner McKenzie, motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you all.